Raina ji, Ma'am Anurupa Roy, Jyoti, Dogra and Sarojini Lewis shall form the panel and put forth their perspectives. M.K. Raina ji is a well-known theatre luminary who has been working in the field of theatre for the last 4 decades, innovating, studying, analyzing, writing and teaching. He has worked extensively in both contemporary and traditional theatre in South Asia and has been instrumental in reviving the traditional folk theatre of Kashmir, Bharat. He has been on the visiting faculty of several national and international institutions such as National School of Drama, the Central University of Hyderabad, the Indian Institute of Technology, the University of Hawaii, USA, etc. He has been a fellow at the Stanford University, USA and a scholar in residence at the Jamia Millia Central University, New Delhi. For this long-term contribution to theatre, he has been the recipient of several awards, including the Sangeet Natak Academy Award, the Sahitya Kala Parishad Samman, the Sanskriti Award, and the B.V. Karant Lifetime Achievement Award. We welcome you, sir. Ms. Anurupa Roy is a puppeteer, puppet designer, and director. She has trained at the Marionetteatern Dramatiska Institute, University of Stockholm, and at the Skola della Marionette. In 1998, she started Kat Katha Puppet Group, which was registered as the Kat Katha Puppet Arts Trust in 2006. Ma'am Anurupa has been an artist in residence at Road Fabric, Apex, Bali, Indonesia, University of California, Los Angeles, Duchess Forum Figuren Theatre, Germany, Charleville, Mézières, France, and has been a recipient of the Bismillah Khan Yuva Puraskar of the Sangeet Natak Academy in 2006. She has received the Junior Research Fellowship of Arts for Puppet Theatre for 2003 to 2005 by the Ministry of Culture, Government of India. She has been in the visiting faculty of National School of Drama Agartala chapter for Theatre and Education module, National School of Drama Bangalore chapter TI course and Actors Training course, as well as the visiting lecturer at the Mass Communications Research Center at the Jamia Millia Islamia in the Department of Communications for Puppet Theatre in the Traditional Media course. We welcome you, ma'am. Jyoti Dogra is a theatre practitioner and director based in Mumbai. Her performances have moved increasingly towards creating devised pieces which are not narrative or text-driven, but use the self as starting point. Her work attempts to find a performance language through metaphors created with the body, voice and text. The material and aesthetics of her work is inspired by the urban Indian ethos, rooted in personal and collective histories, attempting to explore the very personal and finding the universal within it. The focus of her work is the cosmos within and without. She has been showcasing her work at alternate and formal spaces in Tokyo, Zurich, Bern, New York, Berlin, Warsaw, London, Washington DC, Singapore, Denmark, and various cities across India. Her works have been supported by India Foundation for the Arts, Bangalore, Pro Helvetia, Swiss Arts Council, Goethe Institute, Seizen Foundation, Japan, and Arts Council, England. We welcome you, ma'am. Sarojini Lewis, Netherlands, has a background in visual studies and fine art with specialization in archival photography, video art and books art, and is currently working as a researcher artist and curator. Besides her research during the PhD in JNU, in her visual work and curated projects, there is a fascination with history, both of the landscape, the city, the environment, and its user. What would unite them? What kind of view is there? On what is it focused? Repetitive elements in her visual research are photographs of objects, people, migration, and moments that reveal forgotten situations and function as virtual traces and fragments, creating narratives leading to new perspectives. She has participated in several projects of Goethe Institute, curation project in GP Fund Social Science Institute in Allahabad, 2018, Kochi Biennale in 2016, and several international exhibitions such as Museum Escrevedao e Liberado in Brazil and Museum for Contemporary Art Tent in Rotterdam in 2018. Her work is collected in several book art collections such as in the Tate Britain and British Library. We welcome you, ma'am. I invite all the dignitaries on the panel to kindly come onto the stage and take their places. Please. I request Raina sir to kindly begin with the session. Sir, you have the race.
Hello.
रेना साहब आप चाहें तो हिंदी में बोल सकते हैं, मना ही नहीं है.
Raina sir, you can take the other mic if it is not working.
This is not the mic.
Thank you. Well, I think the ball has already rolled in the first session. And here I am. You see, my work is across. I mean, I work with the really indigenous terraforms, I work with professionals, I work with very important actors, professional actors. I work with a huge town. And to me, this subject of visual language, new legal language is a little bit strange to me because theatre is visual language. And right from the Kodiyatam down to what we do today. So this new language I don't understand, but since it has been focused, the work of some people here, I had raised in a seminar before also in NSD a few days back, that my feeling when I watch this theatre, I like it, but I don't like it either. Sometimes the images are so beautiful, then you say, where do they come from? Have they any kind of relationship to the soil that we are in, where we live? We have a huge load of tradition, which is good as well as bad. We do experiments. Whether they're experiments, I don't know. But now this whole new language which is being talked about, I looked at it honestly. I'm not a theoretician, I'm a practitioner, and I will sort of repeat a line which one of the finest Italian theatre persons said, if there are professors in the auditorium, please leave, I have nothing to tell you. He was a performer. What was his name? Anyway. So, when I look at, I'm particularly India-centric. I have traveled the world, but fortunately, unfortunately, I'm very India-centric. And I look at this whole language business here, when this all started around about when India did an embrace with IMF, Indian Monetary Fund, World Bank, and corporates started coming here, changing our infrastructure, changing our landscape, and then we are inadequate, we are poor, we don't have employment, this will generate a lot of things. And this language came in. And today when I look at it, yes, we are there. We have got super trains working, we have got aircraft, we have got linear field, but more and more people are unemployed. More and more people are losing their land. Corporates are pushing them up through violence as well as through laws. Labor laws have changed. So we are sort of embracing what Americans did out the West. And therefore emerges a different kind of genre, different kind of idiom, different kind of media. But problem, honestly, remains the same. Is my theatre related to my people? Is it reflecting what is happening? That's at least people can take it and say, no, I don't care about people. I do my theatre. So these are my observations. And also I see, I went to Uttarakhand, which is just 2 hours from here. It starts 32 lakh people have left hills. There are empty villages. Hardly you may see one old man, second old man there, but where they have disappeared, where they are they in the slums of Delhi, slums of Bombay, we don't know. So the situation that we may present in New Delhi is not a situation that is in the countryside, on the towns. Therefore this language, to me, as I said, I like it, I don't like it. And another practical thing which I had asked one scholar also, I've seen always the actor being marginalized completely in this kind of work. We don't see today the performance I have seen of the Uttara Bharat, Sureka Sikri or Seema Biswas. They are not there. It's a different kind of the marginalized actor becomes part of, almost like what Manikor will say, I can make a film without an actor because actor is as good or as bad as a prop or my tree or whatever image is making. He was a very avant-garde filmmaker, and I worked with him. I worked with all these nutcases filmmakers, so I have a knowledge of what they were thinking. But theatre particularly for me is a community art. If community becomes by auditorium is 30 people, 40 people, 100 people, 200 people, it is not a representation of the community. We are isolating. It becomes a lot of like a Brahmanized kind of a Kuriyatam where only the Brahmins will enter the theatre and the others will be outside it. Third, what I think is the playwright is almost absent in this. And I'm flagging these few things at this point, if at all I may, at this point, but I would like all of them to address these worries of a person like me who is there. Still I'm doing my work, I'm doing my plays. I travel with my plays, I test my plays in the countryside, bring them to people. I want to talk to audiences, what do you think about the plays? I do not want my existence to be very isolationist, that I do theatre, go from the back wall or the backstage and even community leaves from the front door. So at that point, I think we'll start after this. I don't take much time. We'll start with Anurupa. I watched your work, recent work on my wonderful work. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So actually, in the context of all that is being talked about, my PowerPoint is a little superfluous. So I might actually throw it in the dustbin. But I'm really going to start breaking this down. So it looks like I'm the odd fish in the room because number one, I'm a puppeteer. And I feel like I'm in a Greek conference but I only speak English, or in an English conference where I'm the only Greek, or the conference is in Hindi and I'm a Tamil speaker. It is a little bit like that, but I will try. So when we talk about visuals and puppetry, I thought I'd break down my visual theatre first and its basic components. The other word, which is again very rightfully a word for debate, is new. Because puppet theatre is about at least 3,000 years old in India. So it's not new. And everything I do automatically starts connecting to what happened 3,000 years ago. And even today when I say I'm a puppeteer, people say, it's an association. So yes, I do this and I do this and I do some other things also. But there is no getting away from the fact that we have a memory of 3,000 years in our bloodstream. And it carries on even when you speak a new language. Because language just changes. You know, it's like tradition. Tradition is really new today. And this is something puppeteers have taught me. When I began as a puppeteer, the first search was for a language in puppetry. Because in India, you already have the boxes given to you. You have traditional forms in Bengal, traditional forms in Karnataka, traditional forms in Rajasthan. Which one are you? I didn't come from as a traditional practitioner. My parents, grandparents are not puppeteers. So for me, the first search was for a language. And this language took me everywhere, from Sweden to Italy, from Pulcinella, which is a traditional form in Italy, to very modern interpretations of what a puppet is, and brought me right back here and took me right to a village in Karnataka, where I spent a lot of time with a Dogra puppeteer, and found out stories which I had never heard from the Mahabharata, one of the oldest narratives. And so many times you often go looking for something which might be in your backyard, and so language is a very interesting thing. This is my premise before I begin. These are the two things that, these two words of new and visual, and the third word language, because that here is interesting because if you look at puppets, they are visual and only visual. They might have a sound, but the puppet doesn't have a sound. The puppet doesn't speak. It doesn't have a voice box. So sound is an artifice for the puppet. If I speak for the puppet, you know I am speaking for the puppet. It doesn't have an internal sound, and this is the biggest difference between a puppet and an actor. The second one being that the puppet is dead, and the actor is preferably alive. So this is one of the key questions that we are trying to ask an audience when we perform with puppets. What you see is what you believe. So here the visual language of the puppet, for me, and this is personal, there are puppeteers who will disagree, there are a lot of television puppeteers who speak. That's not particularly for me. The second is the outside voice, and very often you would have seen puppeteers use whistles, the swazzle. In Rajasthani Katputli, it's called the boli, boli yahan rakh ke baat karte hain. In the traditional commedia puppets, it's here, kept here. And the sound that emanates is like a high-pitched whistle. The idea is to make the puppet seem like it is talking. Whereas even a child knows that the puppet can't talk, it's made of wood or foam or fabric. The third is the soundscape, and for me this is very important. For me this is, I would say, my little foray into a new language. Because traditionally, the puppet had the musical instrument, a very precise musical instrument, and had sometimes the interpreter's voice. The puppet would speak, Katputli mein jaise jab puppet bolta hai, gaane wala bolta hai, "Arey, wo aisa bol raha hai, ya waisa bol raha hai." So you would have the interpreter's language. For us, sound becomes very important. What sound does wood make on stage? When my puppet steps on stage, when the human foot steps on stage, it has to make impact to make a sound. The puppet, if it has wooden feet, automatically makes a sound. What does that mean? What is the meaning of that? What is the meaning of silence when the puppet's costume, which is made of paper, rustles? These are questions. I would say these are maybe newer questions. Moving to the next. This is very important, and this is very important today in this context of this conference. If this was a puppet theatre conference, I wouldn't have to say any of this, because puppeteers know this and live with this basically. This is my reality. The puppet is dead, and it's made of materials. When you watch a puppet, you know this. Today children are very sophisticated, even they know it. Okay, they know it's a piece of fabric, they know it's a shoe, they know it's thermocol, it's wood. The living puppet, it doesn't exist. If I'm a wonderful puppeteer, it will exist only in the audience's head for a limited period of time. Then it goes into a bag or a box, preferably. The actor takes off his makeup, goes home, becomes who he or she is. This is a very crucial difference. It's not the same thing. The actor has an identity. The actor has a height, weight, color of skin, national identity, regional identity, linguistic identity. The puppet, if he's Hamlet, he's Hamlet. If he's the yellow blob, he's the yellow blob. He or she is nothing else but that. And this the audience knows. So is the puppet dead or alive? When an audience is watching a puppet, it knows I'm watching fabric, I'm watching wood, but I feel moved. I want to laugh. I'm laughing. Children do it spontaneously, adults will do it if the lights are dark. What is this duality? What is this duality when you watch something dead and believe it is alive? There's a word that has been coined and it's called opalescence. This was coined by Professor Henryk Yurkowski of the University of Krakow. It's a very interesting phenomenon. जब आप कुछ देखते हैं पर आप कुछ और विश्वास करते हैं, आपका लॉजिकल ब्रेन कुछ कहता है पर आपका suspension of disbelief कुछ और कहता है, and they coexist together beautifully. Maybe this happens when an actor plays a role. The same thing happens. In the puppets, the only difference is the puppeteer's task is to keep life on stage. I have to make you believe the puppet is breathing. And that is so important in my language. If I lose that, there's nothing. Everything is gone. The puppet is only a metaphor. See, the actor could be a metaphor, could be poetry, could be many things. The puppet is only a metaphor. The minute I put a puppet, no matter how realistic on the stage, it stands for something. And that is a part of the grammar of puppet theatre. I can't escape it. So between life and death is where the license of the puppeteer is. That is key to our language. If I can play with that, then that is the language I'm speaking. An act of creating for an audience is I'm proposing something to you as a puppeteer. First thing I'm proposing is, hello, this piece of cloth is alive. You accepted that. Good. Oh, this piece of cloth is sad. You accepted that. This piece of cloth has no eyes, no nose, no mouth. You believe the eyes, the nose, and the mouth somewhere. Okay? So these are steps I'm taking towards you and then a step back, and I'm making you walk towards me. This is basically what I just wanted to run by. Question is, how far will they come forward to meet us? Okay, and this will try and explain it in the next visual. So who is the puppet here and who is the puppeteer? This is from one of our plays, Mahabharat, and this is the character of Yudhishthir. And in this particular story, in this particular representation, it's a very short glimpse where you see Yudhishthir walk in, and slowly what is revealed is the jewelry that he's wearing is a pair of hands. They're golden hands and there's a head. And it's manipulating him. It whispers in his head that you have to gamble. And every time he resists it, he forces him to gamble. And this relationship, in this relationship, the performer is actually the puppeteer who's moving a puppet which is tied to his back. But in the relationship, the puppet is manipulating the performer. So who's the puppet and who is the puppeteer? This is very crucial to our language. If we can play with the manipulation, the manipulated, that is what is very important for me in puppet theatre. So the key question. And this is something which is my favorite question and has been for a while. What is the puppet and the puppeteer, and what is their interrelationship? I will try and show a video now. Go back. Computers don't like to be manipulated by me. Never have. Okay, I won't waste time. Before I show this, I just want to tell you this is the same scene I was talking about. It's the scene of Yudhishthir. And I just want to say that in the... yeah. So that was a little glimpse of the play, and I just wanted to say that this was a play where the story was not something new. And when I say not something new, it was not because it was the Mahabharata, but because the story was from the Silakayata community which forms Togalukumayata. Everybody is constantly looking for these reinventions of the epics. So what is very interesting is when I spent time with Gundurajaji, who's a Togalukumayata exponent from Hassan in Karnataka. The stories that one found are absolutely incredible. So what very often is not told to us is that Shakuni has a backstory. So you look at any of the mainstream retelling or tellings of the Mahabharata. Shakuni is the bad guy, Yudhishthira is the good guy, Duryodhana is the bad guy, and this continues, so on and so forth. And very recently there are all of these again new age books which is they're writing reinterpretations of these characters. What is interesting about the Silakayata narrative is if you look at Shakuni's backstory, his father Subala and his 99 brothers were starved to death by Bhishma. The minute you're told this story, you say, oh, he doesn't seem to be such a bad guy after all. There's a backstory here. So sometimes something new is actually something really old. And what has become mainstream, what has become accepted, and what is being told to us is actually what is new. So it's a really interesting psychological aspect to this entire narrative building and storytelling. I just wanted to bring this in because I think every time we perform with puppets, we invoke something. Number one, there's no going away from the fact that people automatically go to something very primeval, very atavistic, very something which probably reminds us of what our ancestors used to do when they were making cave paintings or telling stories to each other in the caves. They invoked something which was larger than them. And puppets somehow still do that. That sense of wonder even in an adult audience. If I was to pull out someone's shoe and perform right now, there'd be a moment like that, which I find very interesting. So for my language, I have to keep this invocation through the language. There is no escaping it. The other is, I picked this picture, it's got nothing to do with one of the current shows, it's a very old show. It's somehow there's this intimacy in puppetry. That everyone feels they know what the puppet is going through. And again, there's a study by psychologists currently who are studying brain waves of people watching dead material come alive. And it's very interesting because what they find is, since you are projecting, This study has shown that people with prosthetic limbs who experience pain in their prosthetic limbs, you have a plastic leg, you experience a pain in your toe, even though there's no nerve ending there, have the same part of the brain triggered as the ones who are watching puppet theatre. So you can imagine what I'm thinking when I have a puppet in my hand. It's completely crazy, but this is what an audience is experiencing. So that's something which is happening automatically. The second thing that is happening, whoops, this is not happening. is puppets evoke something. Now one of the key things is the actor in puppet theatre, apart from being dead, can defy a lot of limitations of the actor's body. It can be any size. See, an actor can grow taller, but rarely can an actor grow really short. The smallest puppet I have is 3 inches. The biggest puppet I have is 40 feet. So that's something that I like about my actors. I can change their shape and size and color and you know. Also, they can be made of plastic. They're made of thermocol. They don't protest too much. Sometimes. So what I mean by evocation is, when you see an image like this, the tiny creatures at the end of our hands. It's a head where the body is a human hand. What does it evoke in people? There's some resonance, there's some memory. We're constantly evoking some memory. Of course, all performances are doing this. I'm not saying they're not doing this. But it's essentially about life and living. And something very primordial again. And lastly, this is our job, I think, as puppeteers, is to provoke. And it's not a coincidence that in every tradition across the world, in every new performance, there is somehow still the strongest person is the clown or the jester. Because in puppet theatre, you get away with it. In puppet theatre, you didn't say it, the puppet said it. And this is so critical to the language that the puppet speaks. The last thing I would like to share is a quote. And I think this is in essence what the language of this medium is. Thank you.
Thank you, Anurupa. You said puppets are dead, but they really are not dead. Living puppets. I've seen your performances. It's very interesting to see the contemporary person who's linking his work to the, to the height into the interiors of the landscape of India and working with the tradition and getting something very contemporary from there. And also, they were also performing with you. Yeah. So it is a collaboration. It is a give and take to walking together, collaborating together, marching together, creating mistakes together, but then working together. And now I have Jyoti Dogra, who is a solo performer, very interesting experiments. Very good to hear you now.
Hello, good evening everybody. I'm Jyoti Dogra. I'm based in Bombay, and I don't want to think I'm a solo performer, but I have been working alone for a while now. I have to admit it started mostly because of the circumstance. I was living in Bombay. I wanted to begin work. I'll start again. So, see, essentially I'm an actor. Most of my work is driven by my instinct as an actor. When I started, I essentially was Khalid Tayyuji and started creating material. And essentially the first work I made, I was creating material for about 2.5 years, and there was so much material and I was in the material that eventually I realized that perhaps I should direct the work. In an earlier conversation, you were talking about the poor theatre, and from that perspective, I would say my theatre is poor theatre. It begins with nothing. I mostly work with very little to no props. The material of the work is focused on the body of the actor. The material comes from the body of the actor, which is in my case me, and is invested in the body of the actor. However, I'd like to clarify here that when I say the body of the actor, I don't essentially mean the body doing movement work as one would understand in, say, contemporary dance or yoga. Like the rigor is a different kind of a rigor. The rigor is essentially concentrating on what an impulse in the body, where is the impulse in the body? Is it in the spine, is it in the leg, is it in the shoulder? And then what text will come from there? In what language? I only speak 3 languages. So my work is essentially in English, Hindi and Punjabi. Also, most of my work is very urban centered because I'm born and brought up in Delhi and now I'm living in Bombay. Although I would like to believe that the work is very rooted in the urban reality, my reality or the reality around me. And actually when Abhilash called and told me that he'd like to invite me, my first reaction was that in my work, there is no visual in the conventional sense of a visual. There is just an actor. There is the new work which I made, which is called Black Hole, which I will show in a bit. I used a bed sheet, but essentially I started working with a sheet simply because I wanted to work with something outside of myself. A work I've done before this is just an actor. There's nothing on stage except the actor. An earlier work also had just a frame. So visually, the visual in the work is created through sound, through text, how the text shifts, and through the body itself. The body of the actor, which becomes sort of the, not just the emotive instrument, but it is the material, and it translates that material. When you think of a visual, I was thinking in my work, essentially the visual, it's not so much that I create a visual as the visual sort of sits one in the relationship between me and the spectator. A lot of work, especially in this, my present work, I'm more and more interested in letting go of lights also and letting go of any kind of paraphernalia and performing for a very small audience where the relationship with the audience is a more naked and a more immediate relationship. So any kind of transformations that happen in the theatre are happening through the performing of the actor, through the actor rather than other design elements. Of course, other design elements do come in because text is a design element, rhythm is a design element, how you're working with sound is a design element. So essentially the visual lies, so the work is not so much in creating a visual as it is in sort of pushing you to, sort of coaxing you to imagine it with me as I'm performing. One work, my very recent work, Notes on Black Hole, which I opened in December last year, which basically looks at astrophysics and mortal laws and finds a way of connecting the two. The work, I started the work essentially with a desire to, I started working with the bed sheet and the work progressed and became a performance. In the design, so I perform the work in 2 ways. One is with the full design, where I use projection mapping, lights and sound. And the other version, which I like to believe is also a complete version, is with nothing, just me and the sheet and a small number of audience, with where everything is lit, where I can see you and you can see me, and it is and does that also function as a full performance with imagery changing, visuals changing more in the imagination of the spectator rather than an actual transformation of that on stage. So what I have here is like a small edit of the design thing, which I'm going to show you. So this is
second law from the United States. All systems spontaneously move towards a state of complete chaos. We eat on the same table. We sleep on the same bed. And we miss each other.
So, in this work, or even in earlier work of mine, all the other, I made 4 works in the past 12 years. I am an actor, essentially, and the actor is the center of the entire work. The actor pushes the performance, pushes the material, finds the material, finds ways of translating the material. A lot of times my work process involves creating a lot of material, then finding where it goes, how does it structure, how does a line flow through it. And I often, essentially also because I am working alone and all my work is devised, so often it takes long because it becomes difficult to understand what is the thread here, or what is it that which is the direction I want to take the work to, or which is the direction the work is pushing me to. But essentially, it begins, it is very actor-centric. In this particular work, we have worked with projection mapping and lighting, as you can see. But for me, personally, I feel what is most essential is, it's not even so much the performing by the performer, it is how is it that it connects to you? How do I connect with you? What is it that finds this connection, a taut connection between the two of you, which is more than, which is hopefully more than just looking at the performance material or the idea in the performance, or what is the structure or the design elements. How visceral can it get for you and for me in this moment of performing? The more I'm working, the more I feel it is the act of performance, being in the performance, not just for the performer, but even for the spectator, and how the two can actually connect, but more than connect, like how do they challenge each other, how does the energy flow between the spectator and me, and what does it do to us collectively, which I feel more and more interested in as I'm continuing the work. A lot of times in my work, the visuals created are oral visuals, which are created by sound. Can you, like I mean this. This work is essentially sound, and there's no prop. There's just the body and sound and a lot of conversations. But I feel, of course, there's light, which changes the space. But it is also how the performer occupies the space, which visually starts to change the visual in the head of the spectator. Yes. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Straight.
Hello.
Straight.
So first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Pillay for inviting me here as well. And I come from an artist background, and so more visual than theater, I would say. but I'm still, I was kind of trying to look for the connection, and I'm gonna more like do this in a kind of a reading through some of the things that, yeah, in a kind of paper format, so I hope it's not too boring, otherwise interrupt me. Okay, so actually this, what I want to share with you is coming from the PhD research that I'm doing in JNU as visual research, but also I would like to look from my own artist background and from this idea of reflexivity come to other artist practice as well. I've been working on the indentured labor migration from India to the Caribbean. So traces of this migration can be found in villages in the Bhojpuri region, while among Indian migrants in Suriname. Suriname is a country also in the Caribbean belt, you can say, but it's part of the mainland South America above Brazil. So people were migrating there around in the time frame of 1873 up to 1924. So I was looking at the objects material culture from India, and alongside this the cultural borrowings from the adoptive culture, and that can be observed over there. So the connection between Suriname and India. So I would like to discuss a few examples of the art practice that opens up questions and interpretations of archives that are explored physically. So during this talk, I aim to investigate how certain archival documents and photographs became pieces within my work, central pieces, and allowed for, yeah, you can say, new visual interpretations. So I would utilize the concept of reenactment and performativity, and I will discuss some of the literature I study. And these I kind of incorporate as among the larger frameworks and theoretical frameworks that are like integrated as kind of loose notes. And this has to take a final shape. So, yeah. So Rebecca Mondrag, in her writing on reenactment, within the context of photography, mentions Mircea Eliade, who noted that the act of traveling back in time is at the core of modern psychotherapy. The cure, quote, the cure of trauma consists precisely in a return to the past, a retracing of one's steps, in order to reenact the crisis, to relive a psychic shock and bring it back into consciousness, unquote. Thus, Mondrag concludes that real photography is a way to cope with experience. She further refers to projects where artists are more accurately restaging old photographs, and refers to the gap between the real and the unspeakable that is enforced by reenactment, that, as the author says, depict the true nature of the trauma. Mondrag further examines the act of rephotographing projects, reenacting earlier works of art, and recreating of war. So she explores two ways. On the one hand, artists who are rephotographing famous scenes, old anthropological photographs like Pushpamala's work, and then also the type of reenactment that is more like recreation of war. So she mentions Marina Abramovic, Sovico. Then she says, this is a quote, family photographs and historical documents each allows the observer to return to the past, unquote. Then I would like to go back to my own work. Close to the city of Dresden in Germany, there is an almost forgotten ethnological museum in a village that is called Herrnhut. There is a collection collected by missionaries in 1735, and two of these main focuses of the missionaries were Suriname and Leh. So I visited the collection, tracking down the location, which is very hard because it's in the middle of nowhere. And I wondered how the path of the missionaries had crossed the path of my ancestors. archival photographs and objects from the archive of the missionaries in Germany documented the migration in the 20th century in Suriname, the migration from India, that is. So besides the photographs, a set of objects represented this Indian community. The missionaries returned with this material to Hermund, accompanied by different diaries. So a personal encounter of this collection and the act of holding the objects physically while documenting resulted in a series of self-portraits. Here, identity is linked to various histories and geographies of migration. In a playful meeting between body and object, I was questioning, like, what does it mean to have the same migration routes as the object? So I was some examples you can see. So the question was the origin of these objects and whether they made the same migration as the Indian community that had migrated. So in between these, I was also looking at old photographs. So you can see here a connection. Here is the head of a missionary, and then there the missionary selling the head in more than 100 years ago. So I was looking at these connections in a more playful way, but also writing about them and so on. So here the curator of the museum the veil is held by the curator, and it connects to a photograph of a woman who wears the same veil in Egypt. So this could be displaced in a collection, and it's possible misinterpretation leads to the idea that sources of object could be beyond the interpretation of memory of migration. So a meeting regarding the veil happened with another an Iranian calligraphy master, Hamid Kademi, there in Germany when I was there. So that's a present meeting. He wrote his calligraphy on the print, a self-portrait with a veil that was part of the collection, representing a community that was not at all part of the community. So, according to him, I'm wearing a bushing to be found in North Iranian culture. We assume that it was actually Iranian and probably displaced in the collection. Later, we found out that it was Egyptian. The object thus migrated imaginary from one context to another, depending on the conversation with scholars, experts, and the material evidence, such as this photograph. So he wrote this calligraphy on the print. And then I was wondering, can the photograph with the veil be placed within this term of enacting? The migration history incorporates concepts of that displacement, and perhaps at this point the association of identity can be connected to this example. This is a question. So the series of self-portraits and objects are combined with unexpected meetings at the present, at that moment in 2015, with landscapes and persons in Dresden, that is a place in Germany. I chose to make a sort of loose, open documentation between objects and traces, and cultural references of the current migration in daily life in Dresden. The series of photographs in this photograph, we can see a prior action of exchange of clothes with the Pakistani woman Rabia Ahmad and me. The meeting between Rabia and me was a form of reenactment, as we both wanted to sort of restage our meeting. But by wearing her red kurta, there is a link made with Pakistan where she grew up, and I also wanted to refer to a moment of time, a transit from Europe, Germany, to India. The photography was taken along a high metal gate of the housing and industrial area where we lived. At the time, there was this Birgitta neo-Nazi movement against, you can say, foreigners and migrants active in the same city in Dresden. And it was more safe for the residency program to place me in between Asian language students. who were living in residency at a larger distance from the square where these actions were held. So somehow this meeting with Rabia is part of a fragmented experience of searching for visual evidence of ancestral migration in the middle of nowhere in an agricultural landscape of Dresden, and being in a stage of transit to India as well. I wanted to intermingle the experience of the now, the so-called present, and the historical migration and encounters of missionaries at the Heritage Collection. So these are all encounters with people along this research. Then I was also, this is another scene where I photographed myself with the vegetable Raina and in the Saksische Schweiz. This landscape is very famous for the German painter Caspar David Friedrich, but one could not recognize it from this photograph perhaps. But I'm holding this vegetable in my hand and I'm wondering how are we connected together. Something that reappeared in my mind was, why does it relate to a migration history? And what do I have to do with this personally? Amelia Jones describes how reenactment is also a form of repetition with performance art and how the idea of experiencing and repetition leads to the understanding of the past. Quote, the reenactment both testifies to our desire to know the past in order to secure ourselves in the present and the paradox of that knowledge always taking place through repetition, unquote. So she says that reenactment activates precisely the tension between our desire for material and the impossibility of ever fixing this in time and space. Reenactment both testifies to our desire to know the past in order to secure ourselves in the present and the paradox of that knowledge always taking place through repetition. There is thus a paradox of knowledge and providing our own inexorable mortality, the fact that we are always reaching to secure time and always failing. This concept of reenactment talks about the preservation of history as well as how we can grasp and inhabit certain re-experiences of this history. So Jones defines these reenactments in categories and also says that it's quite difficult to establish the beginning as already iconic art performances are performed more than once in earlier incarnations, so it's what is actually the first performance of the performance is hard to establish. She then mentions Marina Abramovic with seven easy pieces, where she actually performs other people's performances. And then here you can see a work by Jeremy Deller. He restages this political event. So it's a political event. And he mentions about this. After 2 years of research, the reenactment finally happened, with about 800 historical reenactors and 200 former miners who had been part of an original conflict. I was asking the reenactors to participate in the staging of the battle that occurred with living memory alongside the veterans of the campaign. I've always described it as digging up a corpse, giving it a proper post-mortem, or as a 1,000-person crime reenactment. So this work is, you can see, you can actually note down the link and then study it if you care to, because it's quite a long piece and so on. I'm just showing still. And here another example of Rob Dickinson, who does this famous psychological experiments where the actors are restaging this historical event, you can say, or historical happening. So it's a way to retrieve past events by redoing them in some kind of fashion. So I think there's a gap between like what I have found in this like kind of examples and between what I have been trying to do. But I'm still searching for like, how to connect these kind of things, because I think there's a very rigid division between like the political reenactment and the aesthetic reenactment, or the more like really categorized in performance art, such as Raina. So yeah, this is just the search of trying to define that. So here there is a series of work that I named Traces, and I researched the influence of environment and the idea of reenacting and how that can be shaped through the body, textures of material and touch. The actual physicality of the body as the translation of memory becomes important beside the acts of being in touch with the materiality through skin. Another impulse of working with my own body evolved through this universal feeling of estrangement of nature and one's own body, the everyday experience of the digital encoded world that we live in right now. How can we remember through the body? Can we be in conversation with our own body? In the time of indentured migration, the bodily act of performing labor was connected to the physical agreement of signing an act. That is in the meaning of indentured labor. Kind of, it all is about a contract. So, it's not all about the contract, but there it starts with this contract. So there's a physical agreement of signing an act, a fingerprint, a thumb, or the name of the migrant would bound them to the contract of almost 5-year duration of physical hard labor. So you can also see, like, imagine this, like the thumb or the signature of someone who barely knows what he's going to do in another country, doesn't know he's going. Most of the cases don't know they will leave India actually, and physical labor of actually 5 years of work on a plantation, replacing slaves. So the photography here, it's taken on a day of Holi, and it's combined with the old form where one sees the contract. So somehow I was trying to understand the contradiction between these two aspects, and it's kind of an interplay. The contrast of traces of the celebrated day and the factual information of the contract. So I'm still in the process of defining and like giving this right context, but this was part of the photograph and the series of works where in JNU you can see the hostel, Shikra hostel, and I don't know, somehow a sort of more loose way of dealing with that kind of migration and using like colors and also the landscape of the present. So always in mixing this idea of a history and where am I now? You know, how can one combine? And then also I'm interested in like this series of where what is happening outside, such as the day of Holi, actually physically is attached to the skin. No? One sees a trace of the day in the end of the day when we all have this kind of trace. So and then also was bringing or traveling with other people through the landscape and working with colors. And also the idea of like here sharing something, sharing a walk, or sharing something together. So not only that historical indentured labor is always present in the work. So now I just wanted to quickly go back to the beginning to talk about the first image. Oops. So this, perhaps this man can be a symbol for the present and the past. And the image for me is linked to the past and the memory of the indentured labor, but also could be part of a current situation, such as someone stranded. When we think of all these like cases of refugees in Europe, nevertheless, there's a letter there, and that brings you closer to this memory of the past. To be presented in an undecipherable code of an old script of Bihar. The past is never real, we can fully grasp, and by different perspectives and archives we try to decode it, but somehow it remains hidden. The unreadable letter, in the fact that I have not really found someone who can read it as yet, perhaps the day will come. But yeah, the unreadable letter presents this hidden past and the distance that remains between us and the passage of time. So then I want to go to some of these works of other artists that are working with this history. So this is a work by Shiraz Parju, and he is engaged with archival photographic material of Mauritius, and he made a contemporary short film of the landscapes. And when I was thinking of this idea of reenactment, I think it's also in the idea of this work, where he actually repaints the background to set the ancestors of this indentured labor free. The act of painting and erasing the backgrounds can be seen as a reenact, as a form of reenacting. This is an idea in my head. I still have to see how that can be more, how I can write about it more extensively. Then there's another artist, Simpanji Lal. She was born in Fiji and made a video such as this one, Parabani, which is depicting the hybrid space that shaped her family from landlocked caste members to casteless indentured laborers. So the video, as she says herself, is an exploration of the artist along with her mother through healing and the visual metaphor of spices. So I'm not presenting the video here, but the stills, where you can see the movement of the hands, the water, and the different spices going through. Then she poses the question, does an imagined new identity begin with your body or with the water? Thinking of this in context of the history of ships sailing on the seas with slaves, indentured laborers, Nisa Mawani points how what we forget and remember is shaped by land. So she points to the idea of a migration history often recalled through the arrival and departure. But she points to the moment in which the vessel is traveling on the ocean and how this was vital to survival and also contained a space for imaginaries and freedom. She questions, quote, how might forced and so-called free passage be recollected and retold when the sea is repositioned as a force of history and a site of memory, unquote. So Kalapani is also a work here by Anurupa, who made an installation of this glass jar filled with black water and then an audio piece where people are singing. And then he points to these hybrid identities, the multiple seas, rivers, and water streams. And he says that he does not want to identify with mainland India, but with the journey through several waters. So then I just want to say a few more words, almost ending. This was an exhibition in the D.B. Plant Institute in Allahabad. Maybe some of you know it. It's a social science research institute, and last year maybe I held an exhibition there with 8 artists. And a little bit about the exhibition. I will read a small excerpt. The unstable ocean surface leads to a migration story constituted between a place of deport and a place of arrival. And between the fast movement of oceans, a timeless exchange of cultures connect various geographic locations. The ocean takes its own course or time to do so. Waves and circular movements of the sea become a mirror through which our vision transforms, distorts, and reshapes. On the Indian shore, a bottle was found that once belonged to a migrant who traveled to Suriname. Someone said it was thrown in the sea. The sea brought back the bottle through the movement and its currents. It contained a cutlass, a sugarcane, an old sari of a lonely woman, footwear, a letter of a missing girl, a photograph of an old family house in Bihar, a flying sow, a black cloth with a hole made by a surgical blade, and a parrot that repeated the words from the letter of a missing migrant. The bottle resembles a surrealist shape, a transition of country, once taken by the migrant during a 3-month boat journey. So, inspired by this migration journey, we were able to revive reenactment in an emotional quest behind the journey of migration, such as the concept of missing or searching. In the installation of Traces of an Old Home by Preeti Singh, this was combined with the series I made about the personage Madame Jeanette, that through archival material and of former slaves visualized a migrating woman from Brazil. So, in one work, which you can see a combination of works, and then Preeti Singh's work, and the archival images. So there was one, way we were working on this project as looking at the idea of the memory of an old family house in Bihar, and also it being the place of where these migrants once also left. So being in this context or this geographical location, the idea of missing and searching somehow connected to each other. So I would like to end there, and I think that that project will somehow find its way to new, let's say, new shapes. This is a booklet we also made with very nice participants that showed up there in the institute who had nothing to do at all with art, so it was really quite nice. Okay, so.
Friends, now we are coming to the last last phase for our talk today. And now you have seen what is new visual language in theatre. We have 3 presentations, 3 journeys of 3 artists here, and I'll open it straight to the questions and answers, without wasting time. Questions? Yes. कोई दे दो भैया.
Question from two questions.
माइक ठीक है से बोलो ना. ये टेक्नोलॉजी है.
In the piece that you showed, you still had a puppet behind you. So there was a part in the video where he takes his shawl out, and then he makes that head pop up. So how do you deal with the interface? I mean, it's not there. He makes it pop up, and it's there. We can see that it's not something. It's not a character, and it's being created. It's a facade. So as an audience, I personally feel that it looks like it's fake or something. How do you, as a maker of that play, deal with that feeling which might come in the audience?
The moment when he comes alive is fake, or the whole time it was fake?
That imagery stayed.
But it is not really there, it's in his head. So what is in my head might be fake for you. It's as simple as that. See, the puppet really doesn't exist, and I want you to know that. For me, it's not magic. I'm moving it. Why shouldn't you know it? And this is something which is very crucial in the medium. It's dead. It's not there. I want you to know it. And I think what you're talking about is a discomfort audiences have with the puppeteer being revealed. For me, this discomfort is so important. भाई जो नहीं है वो नहीं है और जो है वो है. अब ये आपके सामने है, ये सब टेक्निक रिवील है, उसने इलास्टिक से पहना हुआ है और वो हेड यहाँ आ गया है. Now deal with it. This is life. You know, this is how things, and theatre is a slice of life. This is, I think our job in theatre is not to hide and beautify and present what will be taken by. It is to present a certain reality which is like, it jars. So I think provoke is the word I used in the end, and I think this is the major provocation of puppet theatre. And it was a crime in the early 20th century where puppeteers were hidden away. And this provocation never happened. ये शायद बच्चों के लिए शुरू किया गया था कि बच्चे को मैजिक देखना चाहिए, पपेटियर नहीं देखना चाहिए, उसके धागे हटा दो, पपेटियर को छुपा दो. क्यों? So this is for me the most important element in puppetry.
When you said you made 4 works in 12 years, and I got introduced to your work through Ashok Puransar. He told me to see your trailer of North Channel, and I was quite blown away. I want to know, on an average 3 years for one work. So, what is your normal life?
That you asked me for a normal life. See, I work in my house because Bombay is too expensive to have rehearsal space. I work, when I begin my work, I begin with, I don't want to work with an idea or a text. I simply get on the floor and begin. And over a period of say 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a kind of a direction of the material begins to show itself. And then I start to follow that. So, considering the speed, and it's not so much the speed I work practically every day, but because I'm more interested in not starting with an idea, but arriving at an idea, arriving at a text, arriving at a narrative. Since you are waiting to arrive, a lot of the work is about waiting. Waiting for an impulse to come, waiting for not just a way to translate it, but sometimes even to learn a technique of how to translate it, what to do with it, and sort of finding a structure in this material. So my normal life is like that of all practitioners, getting up, going to work, and getting back home. It's just that I just have to go from the bedroom to the living room. So because I'm working alone and I'm working at home. But essentially, the work is, because it's like I'm doing the work of a writer, actor, director, but I'm not actually writing something before. I am looking for what it is that will become. And the process of the work is very, very invested in the organic journey that you will take with it. The depending on the impulse, depending on the unconscious, and what material comes from the unconscious, and how to actually consciously structure it, make sense of it, find a language within it. So, yeah.
And one more thing, ma'am. When you take so long to make a play,
I mean, it's not कि मैंने 12 साल में मतलब 3 साल ऐसे भी काम किए, ऐसा नहीं है.
I want to know that, do you believe in improvisation during the show?
See, the thing is, actually no. The work I do and the way I've been trained, all details are very clearly set. What changes is, as I was saying earlier, my work, I'm more and more interested in this relationship. And by the relationship with the spectator, I don't mean like some kind of a participation, jahan aap kuch bol rahe hain, main jawab de rahi hu. Not like that. A more nuanced relationship, which is between, which I feel, if your presence itself is, if not changed, it is definitely fueled by the presence of the spectator who is watching. The gaze, your gaze to me and my gaze to you will shift things, but the actual structure is very precise, and it stays that way.
how does it seed idea? How do you start it? With some seeds, some notion, some story?
No, like the piece that I showed on the video.
No, any piece.
I mean, I give an example. I can give like 2 works. With this piece, my only interest was with working with something outside me. So actually, I started working with the chair which broke, then I worked with some garbage bags, which after a while ran out. And then as soon as I started working with the sheet, somehow the material that started coming was about the cosmos and general theory of relativities, जो वो चीजें जो मैंने स्कूल में पढ़ी थी और मुझे थोड़ी बहुत याद थी. And I was personally very surprised because I'm interested in astrophysics, but I'm not a science student. But it stayed, and then so a lot of the work is about staying, waiting, continuing, watching your own self. Also watching, because अक्सर when you are the performer, you are the actor who's making the work. As an actor, I have some strong points. वो चीज़ें मैं फटाफट कर सकती हूँ, खासतौर से improvisation वाले काम में. So a lot of the work is actually vigilating your own self, being your own police and saying ये हटा दो, ये भी हटा दो, वो भी हटा दो. So उसके बाद क्या बच गया? And then of course you are not just sitting there waiting, you are also proactively researching. Or like in an earlier work where I worked a lot with sound, I trained in sound for quite some time. After a while I realized, okay, this is where I want to go. So that's how the idea forms over a period of time.
Who watches your work first? And when you reveal, I'm going to be any friend or anything.
Normally, anywhere between 8 months to a year and a half, I show it to 1 or 2 people.
You trust them or their critics?
I trust their critique, that's why.
Now, you work alone, so how do you know if the scene works or not? Like, do you work with a camera? Or?
No, I don't work with a camera, and actually, I personally distrust camera. I personally very strongly believe that all actors, all performers, have an inherent knowledge of when it works. It's just that for a long time, I spent like a very large part of my life working with the director, sitting there, observing for me, while I have the luxury of only performing. But once I got into a position where I was required to direct myself, I feel all actors know when it has worked. It's just that we don't really seize that, because in a lot of performative spaces, that position is given to the director. The actor's job often is to translate that which is the vision of the director. But even 1 or 2 works which I have directed, I have always felt that the actor's job is to create the material. His job is not to translate my vision, but to create a vision with me. And actor is he is the most active person there. His job is as much to think as it is mine if I'm in a directorial position. So, and I feel a lot of it has to do with sharpening of your instinct. And sharpening of an instinct is also something which is a training. As you keep doing it, you get better at it. ऐसे नहीं हाँ इनको तो पता चल जाता है, इनको नहीं पता चल जाता है. वो तो एक थोड़ा सा हिस्सा है उसका. मगर आप जब करते रहते हैं, it's like any other training. You get better at it, at observing yourself.
As a performance maker, how does your unconventional practice of theatre performance help for an educational institution where there were so many barriers to put up a show in an institute? That's one. And when you treat the text with different materials, like how do you make it into a kind of performance? I just want to when you puppet and all this, the material what you use in a different way, how does it convey in an educational institutions?
Yeah.
Since I am from a university, so I would like to we struggle sometimes with the text, with the local culture and other things.
So when we are actually making certain shows, we make it not keeping in mind a kind of institution or a kind of audience. Though this particular show, and I've only chosen one show to share today, there are many, many shows. We also work extensively with schools and in schools. But this particular show was not intended, when it was initially made, for any one kind of audience. We probably knew at the back of our minds that this was not for children. This is something we knew about this Mahabharata production, for example. In terms of interpretation, I'll just answer it in a broader way. So, you know, the Mahabharata is something which is performed in our country. You know, if you look outside our country, Peter Brook has performed it in France. I mean, across time and through culture, it's been performed in so many ways. So, in the oral narrative, it is sung, danced, done with shadow puppets, different kinds of puppets. So, for us, one of the key elements was that what do we do with the words? This was a huge challenge for us, because the more words you impose on something like puppet theatre, which is a visual form, the less interesting the visuals become. So one of the key challenges for in our case was then interpreting the Mahabharata for puppets, number one. Number two, like I said, what is a puppet then? It's this whole constant existence of plastic art and performing art in the same space. Without the plastic art, it's not puppet theatre. And without the performer, it's just a sculpture. So if I have both of these things, how are they both important to narrate the Mahabharata story? Which is why we had 14 different characters, and essentially their mindscapes. So the focus was really on a particular incident in their life at that moment. So you saw Yudhishthir, Amba, the Amba narrative began with Amba dressed as a bride. And Bhishma is, you know, facing Arjun. And Amba is a 3D puppet, and you see the rest in shadow. Amba starts walking towards Bhishma, and when she walked towards him, she talks about the bride who wasn't, because he rejected Amba. He said, I don't want to marry you. And she starts taking off each one of her ornaments and turns, and in the end she takes even her face off and becomes Shikandi. So these kinds of, the interpretations have to be true for only puppet theatre. This was something we were very conscious of. Now here comes the mindset that puppetry is for children. And this is a show which is not at all for children. So it's very dark in spaces. I mean, there is Ashwatthama whose his skin strips off at the end of the show. And a skeletal man remains, who's almost demonic, who's almost like a, you know, sort of a reptile. So I think we have to be mindful of then who are we presenting this work to, which comes to your question. So this has worked in institutions like colleges, but it is something I dare not take to very young children. But we've had children in our audience, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, who have asked us some very intelligent questions, as children often do. So yes, I don't think this particular show and a lot of other shows are not created with an idea of taking it to one kind of institution. But if we are addressing something particular to an institution, of course puppet theatre can and is being used to do that.
My other point is that coming to the text, like if you take any epics, the interpretation of Mahabharata is different from each area. So that kind of situation when you are taking into materialistic, the way you are using the material and you communicate it in a different way. For example, you take epics of Mahabharata. Each region has their own interpretation of the text. So in such kind of things, how do we treat the text as a director or performance actor?
See, I think I'll just say one thing, that the metaphors in the Mahabharata are very strong, and so are the archetypes. If you look at the Gandhari archetype, we picked up the scene of Gandhari mourning over 100 bodies of her sons. We performed this show in Bangalore, in Hassan, in Delhi, in Poland. Everyone gets what is happening. I mean, it's iconic, right? Across the world. The mother lamenting over the dead son's body. So I think some things don't need any language at all. So the choice very consciously with the characters, that moment that we chose to pick up, and the very clear dichotomy of that character was visual. So that's what I'm trying to say. The text is something we really kept at bay. We were very true to the visual mostly. And yes, it was guided by the Salakayata Mahabharata, which has stories within stories within stories. So it's not from your, the so-called mainstream. I don't even know which the mainstream Mahabharata is.
Bharati Vidya Bhavan.
Yes, sir. Yes. So it wasn't the Bharati Vidya Bhavan Mahabharata, nor was it the B.R. Chopra Mahabharata. But so there's the Panduvani Mahabharata, there's the...
every region has, there are 200 Mahabharata.
In fact, in regions there are streets with different versions. Within Karnataka there are versions. So this was something we were mindful about, and like I said, these stories that we picked up are very old stories, which when you tell people now seem like very new stories. So we are not it's not even an interpretation, it's just telling. So I think in this context especially, it wasn't even a retelling, it was just a straight telling. Yes, with a huge focus on the visual aspect of it, because that is the medium.
Any other question? Okay. Yeah. Mike, did you?
It was very interesting to hear you,
Anurupa.
So yeah, I mean, these days, I'm a student of performance studies and also quite new in the domain and trying to understand things, explore things. So it was interesting how you spoke about invoke, evoke and provoke. And I liked how you talked about the awareness of what is present and what is dead, and at the same time the coexistence of it with the suspension of disbelief. And if I put this idea in understanding or decoding the effect of performances such as Black Hole, or the last performance of Damini Basu, she's a performer from Calcutta, made on hijab, where she just runs around the audience in a burqa, very transparent burqa. You can't figure whether she's wearing anything inside the burqa or doesn't. And there is just one sound of azan or some such rambling that plays in the loop. There's no words, nothing. She just runs for half an hour. And that's it. I can't really say how I interpret it, but it does evoke something that I cannot articulate. So, and it's the same with, I think that's the kind of effect that I had after watching Black Hole as well. It's nothing to do with, I don't understand astrophysics, but I could understand what it is, what it means to talk about it when you are afraid that somebody you love might just pass away. So, I think then is it a possibility to consider then to talk about a visual language, a performative language from the perspective of the affect or the unconscious? I don't know if I'm framing it and I'm still thinking what I'm trying to articulate it, but this is just a thought if you can spot
it. See, I would say, definitely for my work, but even when I go to watch a work, I am always interested in work which evokes something which I feel is personal to me. Not in terms of my personal history, not in terms of कि मैं अपने दुख से उसको connect कर सकती हूँ, but something which it evokes something personal in me in terms of my aesthetics or imagination or my fears or even desires. And I feel at least, like actually, when you were asking the question, I started imagining this lady running. And I was wondering, what is the kind of a performance created where somebody is simply running? And what is it that it does to an audience? Or earlier when Anurupa was saying that yes, there is a puppet which is tied to your shoulder, you look at it, and then you move from there. And what happens is that despite the fact that you know it is tied to you, despite the fact that you know this is made of plastic, it does start doing something to you. Because it moves further from there. Because the work is not about, or like in Black Hole or even in an earlier work, I keep moving between different characters. I keep moving between astrophysics, like proper laws of thermodynamics, laws connected to black holes, principles, two very personal stories, but the ships are naked and in front of you. They're not hidden, there's no makeup, I feel this sort of this kind of this lack of artifice creates, rather than putting you away, pulls you further in, because you become a collaborator in it, because you become a collaborator in terms of imagining with it, rather than another version where, I mean, here there is a lot of artifice, there is a lot of craft, there is a lot of training, there is a lot of precision in terms of what comes how, where, when, but a more conventional artifice is taken away. So things become suddenly more naked. And like Chomsky, whose ideas I follow, often said that the more naked you are in your performing, the more the spectator will come in, more nakedly into it. And I feel that is what perhaps happens. Also, I feel perhaps in works where there is no, like an emotional thread in a narrative, where the structure is not linear, or where interpretations can be many, they start, the spectator engages with it in many ways, at the same time, simultaneously, which is where its value lies.
I think we have already crossed that time, and thank you very much. Thank you for the session.
And request your audience kindly wait for like 3 more minutes.
3 more minutes? Why?
I request the senior faculty.
Europe.
I request everybody.